Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're going to play with the Schottkey Ratchet. The Ratchet is a drum machine, it's a rhythm brain, it's a percussive, beat-making, programming drum dream of a module that's going to pump percussive sounds and clocks and triggers throughout your rack. It's a trigger sequencer which has one of the most straightforward workflows I've come across in Modular. I mean, so often with trigger sequencers like the varigate or the random rhythm or other bits and pieces, you are pumping probability into your system. It might play, it might not. You might get a drum sound, you might not, and that creates interesting rhythms and possibilities. And we talk about Euclideans and we talk about the cycles of percussive possibilities. That's not really this. This is straightforward. I want to play some drums. I want a kick drum there and a snare there. I want some hi-hats. Ratchet is the sort of module that enables that. But while it may have a straightforward workflow, it certainly has some interesting goodies under the hood. And it has 12 whole channels of it, which kind of enables you to run your whole show a bit like this. Sorry, getting carried away. I could play with this thing for hours, which is always the sign of an interesting and involving and engaging module, which is certainly what this is. So, in a nutshell, it's, I guess, an 808 style drum machine. You have 16 steps, well, you have 64 steps, but you have 16 that you can see, these buttons here, and I hit the buttons to program the step. You know, that's it. 12 channels of it. So I dial through different channels, I set the pattern up, and the pattern plays. It's beautiful. It's simple. It does exactly kind of what it's supposed to, if you know what I mean. I've had it about 6 months. Leah Harmon from Schottkey Modular sent it to me to have a bit of a play with, and it's taken a while to get to the point where I can sit down and review it. Not because it's a difficult module or anything like that. I just haven't literally had the time. However, it's sat in my rack and I use it kind of all the time for a variety of different things. Simply, I just want a beat. I've got something going on, I've got a patch going on, I just want to stick in a kick drum. Bomb, I can put that in. I want to put in a little bit of hi-hat. I can just quickly stab those into the buttons, not having to worry about probabilities and sliding up things, going through menus. No, I just hit a bunch of buttons and patch it in. Similarly, I might want a clock, or an interesting clock, or a clock division, and again I can pump it into here and pump it into something. So it's something which very quickly becomes a useful utility, as well as having the potential to run the whole show. It's also got really nice twinkly lights, which, as we know, is important, very important. So a quick rundown of the specs is that it's a drum trigger module, you could say. You've got 16 buttons, which gives you the first 16 steps. You can step through to 64 steps. There's 12 channels of output. You can save multiple patterns and swap between them and cue them up. You can have individual step lengths on each of those channels, and also individual randomization. You can also change gate lengths, but of course it's called Ratchet, and within there you can also set Ratchet note repeats on every single step individually. It has a mild menu system that doesn't quite manage to fall over itself, and it kind of takes you on a programming journey like the old days with drum machines, and that has this sense of familiarity to it, as well as being quite fresh within a Eurorack setting. So let me bring you in and we'll sort out the basics, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate kind of what it's capable of doing and some of the things perhaps that it can't. So here we are. Don't worry about all this sort of stuff. This is all just plumbed into different things to make sound. These are your 12 outputs for your 12 trigger sequence channels. I've got it running into the Queen of Pentacles over here. And I've also got it running into the Percle from Buffaco, which creates interesting percussion out of other noises. I also have a couple of channels that are creating clocks for other things, and that's one of the interesting things. Because you have 12 channels, you probably have spare stuff. So once you've programmed all your drums, that's all going on. I've still got 3 or 4 channels left. I'm going to use that to clock other stuff, or I'm going to use it to clock divide, or to trigger envelopes, or all sorts of other possibilities throw themselves up because you have this abundance of channels, which is really nice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a blank pattern, I hope. Set that running. And then let's just do the basics. So channel 1, I've got it going into a kick drum. So it's exactly as you imagine it should be. I've got 16 steps going around in a cycle, and I stick in a drum. And there it is. Stick in another one. Maybe another one. That's it. Channel 2 I've got set to a snare drum. 3 I've got set to a clap. 4 I've got set to a bit of a hi-hat thing over here on the Percle. And there you go. I mean, how simple is that? I think I've got a bit of swing on that you can feel. Which I can dial back to nothing. It has a tap tempo as well as you can dial that in. And there you go, job done. We can all go home. It really is that simple. You can program drums. That's what it does, which seems remarkable in Eurorack. It's something which I don't have anything else that does that. I mean, I've got a Behringer RD8 over there which does that. It's very much the 808 style, 909 style drum programming with steps, with stuff lit up. Now, I can do that sort of thing with the drum channel on something like the KeyStep Pro, but that's an enormous thing I have to add to my system, whereas this is sitting directly inside and so has all of that convenience. And once I've got my little thing going on, I can save it to the pattern that I'm on. Pattern 25, save. If I go to pattern 26, I could then perhaps change it around a little bit. Save that into pattern 25, and then I can just switch between the two. It's that simple. I can't really express how simple it is. All right, so 16 steps is fine, but I can go up to 64. So let's go up to 32 steps. Like that. And now I'm going to have 16 steps when nothing happens. But you can see we've got the steps here. And all you do is when you're in drum mode is select by pressing, and it goes through the different 16 amounts of steps. So at the moment we're going 16 to 32, 16 to 32. So 16, you see I've got something set up. To 32 steps, I do not. So there's a quick way of filling up the steps I've now introduced by copying and pasting the first 16 to the next 16. So I can copy this bass drum pattern by holding drum and pressing save. And then if I go to the 32 steps, I can hold drum, hit the button, and it will now stick that in. So that's now going all the way through. I can do the same with the snare. So I've now got all 32 steps filled up with the same stuff I had in the first one, and obviously I can start putting in variations or, you know, whatever it is I want to do in order to make it different. So programming is quick and easy once you get the hang of which button presses you've got to do to move things from one place to another, to copy, to paste. You can very quickly, you know, build up your patterns and your variations within that. So let's move to the ratcheting then. Its little namesake button is here. It works in the same way as the drum mode does, in that you can still program in ratchet mode, but all it does is adds the additional ability to ratchet individual notes. So when in ratchet mode, all I do is hold the step that I wish to ratchet, and I can then dial that in. You can go from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you can go all the way up to 16, which kind of ends up sounding a bit like noise unless you take the tempo all the way back down again. So the ratchet function is very simple, it's immediate, it's there, and you can dial it in to wherever you want it to be. So far it's been all about intention, doing everything deliberately, selecting what you want to happen when you want it to happen, which, as I say, is really refreshing in a Eurorack module, but also it doesn't have to be like that. We have a random mode. Stick it in random, and then you have this slightly strange flashing, pulsing interface, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around. The idea, I think, is that when lights are solid, then it's being affected by a global change, so global randomization. When they're flashing, it means they're not going to be affected. But there's also another mode, which is when they're pulsing, which is when only that one is affected. but you have to hold it. Anyway, it gets a bit complicated. It sort of works better in the steps mode. But anyway, here I'm just going to randomize these first few channels. These other ones over here are doing clocks that I don't want that to happen to. So I'll just start it up and you'll start to hear the variations in the pattern. Now I find at a very low level like this, it introduces really interesting little changes. But of course this can go up to 100. So as you push it further, it gets nuttier. And it then also starts introducing ratchets all by itself. So it has the potential in here for some serious chaos, which is perhaps unexpected in something which is otherwise really straightforward. But otherwise in there, you've got some really interesting stuff. I mean, particularly if I take this all down to nothing, if I take out the bass and snare, so I've now just got it focused purely on the hi-hat. Puts in some really nice variation purely on that channel. I've now brought in the snare as well to follow the same idea. On here I've got this hi-hat, sort of open cymbal sound coming from the Queen of Pentacles. So it becomes a really interesting way of introducing variations of things as you go, as a kind of performance. Now steps mode uses the similar sort of interface. So either I'm changing the steps for everything, so up to 32, everything goes up to 32, or I can change the step length individually for each channel. So at the moment, as I say, they're all on. I could go to channel 1, for instance, which is flashing. So if I set this going, let's pull the randomization out a second. Try to keep it sensible. Go back to steps. If I hold this one, I should be able to take this. So that's just the kick drum is now on 4 steps. If I go to the snare, I can make that one 32. Make the clap 11 so it repeats irregularly. Make number 4 12. Go Go back to number 1, put that on 5. See, now it starts to lose itself. Then I can stick them all back onto an even keel. So it's very easy to develop different step lengths. You've got different competing rhythms spinning around each other. You know, that is all in there. I mean, the temptation with Ratchet is to see it as a very straightforward device. And as I keep emphasizing, it most certainly is, but it doesn't have to be. With individual step lengths, individual randomization and ratcheting, it can really start to introduce all sorts of interesting possibilities. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be just about drums. It sends out triggers, and actually you have gate options on each step as well. You can expand the gate to the point that it ties with the next one. So you can use it for other things like envelopes, like clocking. Now let me see if I can try to give you an example of that. Right, channel 5, I'm going to trigger the envelope on the Perkle. There, and into there I'm going to bring the output of an oscillator into there. So with a bit of luck, if I go to drum channel 5, I can be triggering this here. Now, this isn't a pitch sequencer, so I can't send pitch from this to the oscillator, but I can run another sequencer from here. So I'm going to take channel 11 out, for reasons I can't explain, and I'm going to pump that in as a clock to a sequencer, which is then going to control, I'm getting this in the right place, the pitch of the oscillator. So, channel 11. So I've now given it quite a slow clock to change the to step through the different sequence steps. Then I can use another channel, say channel 6, to trigger the envelope over the filter. So I've got a filter here. So this one is going to be plugging into trigger an envelope, and I need to take the output of that envelope to control the filter. So channel 6. So as you can see, this is firing the envelope on the filter, and that may or may not match up what I'm playing, or what I'm triggering rather, as far as the output of the oscillator goes. Now the Perkle is providing an envelope for my oscillator. So perhaps rather than using an envelope here, I could use the gating function of the ratchet to vary the opening and the playing of that oscillator. So rather than using this, I'm going to send channel 6 out to a VCA over here that you can't see. I'm going to take channel 5 out to open a VCA over here. Okay, I don't think I'm explaining this very well, so I'll try to explain it again. Got an oscillator, right? Just over here out of shot, oscillator over there out of shot, which plays a note. Plays a note through a VCA. That VCA needs to be opened by something. It's being opened by these triggers on channel 5, and that's all you can hear. It's just being open, shut, open, shut, open, shut, because a trigger is very fast. Now normally I could send this to an envelope, which is what I was doing here. I was sending it to an envelope, and the envelope was creating a bit more space for that bass sound to come through, for the oscillator to come through. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use gate length on these individual steps, I think, to open the gate on the VCA so that we can hear more coming through. To do that, I just hold, I'm in drum mode, I just hold the step and then dial it in. If I take it to 6, it then ties to the next note. So there you have it, Ratchet in action. You can save patterns, you can copy and paste patterns, you can save it all to an SD card which is on plugged in to the front. You can queue up patterns so that it doesn't happen immediately, it happens at the end of the next pattern. So it does have all of that functionality built in. One tip though, which I kept stumbling into, was that when you hit save, it saves it to the pattern in its current internal memory, which is then kind of lost when you turn it off. In order to save it to the card, you have to hold the save button in. But then when you do that, it gives you a little glitch as it's trying to write it. So when you're creating patterns kind of on the fly, you just hit save, and provided that you don't turn the thing off, you're fine and you can zoom from pattern to pattern. But at the end of your session, make sure you go through and hold that save button to ensure that those patterns are saved to the card. Otherwise, that gets a bit annoying. The other thing that's really absent, I would say, is any kind of mute or solo action. So once you've got your pattern going, I can't like turn off the kick drum. I mean, I can pull out the plug, I could turn off the sound source, but it'd be nice to be able to mute and or solo tracks within the Ratchet itself. That's kind of one element of performance that it doesn't It doesn't go there, which is a shame. I guess the thinking behind it is that it's mostly a programming situation rather than a live performance situation. But I'm finding that performing with it live, just jamming with it, is tremendously fun. And just the ability to mute tracks, turn them off, turn them on, would be awesome. So that's probably my biggest gripe overall, I would say. But otherwise, it's a thoroughly enjoyable module, which brings a level of sanity to the percussion in my rack that I didn't have before. Everything else is all possibilities and probabilities, whereas this is intention. And as I say, you can make it go nuts if you so wish. And a little bit, I mean, for me, a little bit of randomization certainly helps produce some variations in the patterns, which is very, very nice. Also, it's also interesting to play with more notes. So to play with 64 steps can be quite fun because you can develop something. I mean, even if you're not trying to create a song, you just want to have, a kick drum which varies a little bit more over time, and you can program that in, because so often we are rotating around 8 notes in your rack. Just a handful of notes, just that one over and over and over again, which is why we like the probability, because that creates the variation. But having 64 steps means that I can program that variation in if I wish to be so controlling. And obviously there's no easy way to show 64 steps unless you have a really wide sequencer. But the interface does brilliantly well enough. Sometimes the buttons don't always seem to work, or you don't press them all the way down. Does it always come on automatically? You have to be a little bit intentional with the buttons, and you do have to wait a little bit when you're pressing a button down in order to change a value. You just need to not do it too quick, otherwise it's not going to pick it up. So the interface kind of imposes a slight lethargy onto you, perhaps. You just have to take it easy, otherwise you end up just going too fast for it. One last thing which would be remiss of me to mention is that Leah Harmon is of course the daughter of Steve Harmon of Synthrotech. Now Steve has built himself a bit of a reputation in all sorts of different things, and I've spoken about it many times before, and I don't want to dig it all up now, but what I would say is that I think it's awesome that Leah Harmon is producing her own modules, and I think she should be fully supported in that, regardless of whether her modules are sold through Synthrotech or not, because ultimately it would be hypocritical to blame the daughter for the opinions or views of her father. So thanks, Leah, for sending this to me. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you produce more modules. I'd love to see more from you. So there you go, that's the Ratchet. I hope that was helpful, and please do consider subscribing to the channel and doing the whole Patreon thing, because that just gets enormously exciting. There's always more reviews and stuff coming online in the channel, so do go and check that out. In the meantime, go and make some tunes.